Welcome to Unlocked, the home of common sense that speaks Britain's language. As we approach the final days of British membership of the European Union, there is no harder fought Brexit battleground than fishing. Unlike the level playing field or financial regulation, fishing is something tangible, emotive, and hugely important.
A key strategic industry, fishing is about much more than just economics. It's a talisman of true independence and sovereignty. Britain's fishing industry once thrived, but it was sold down the river in 1973 when the Tories sacrificed our maritime wealth to join the European Economic Community. But in 2016, Brexit gave us a historic chance to reclaim our waters. Yet 4 years after we voted to leave the EU, the war of words continues.
This week, Michael Gove has said there will be absolutely no compromise on fishing, adding, "This is personal." And shortly before we came on air, David Frost, Britain's chief negotiator on Brexit, issued this historic statement. On fisheries, the gap between us is unfortunately very large. And without further realism and flexibility from the European Union, risks being impossible to bridge. These issues are fundamental to our future status as an independent country. Now that sounds like brilliant news, but with the EU launching legal action against the UK, some fear that Boris Johnson may still give away key concessions on fishing to keep a deal alive. So the burning question on Brexit Unlocked today is this: will we finally take back control of our waters, or will our fishing industry once again be sold out to the European Union by the British government?
So with us today, we have a superb roster of guests who've dedicated their lives to fighting for the British fishing industry. From the front benches of European parliaments to the fish markets of Lowestoft, they've been on the front line of this battle. Okay,
so let's cut straight to our deadly double act. Paul Lyons, the chairman of the Lowestoft Fish Market Alliance, and June Mummery, the queen of the fishermen, the beautiful mermaid, former MEP. You guys have put your hearts and souls into this battle since the very beginning. First of all, I think the 17.4 million Brits would like to thank you for that amazing effort. It's just been incredible, and it's so important that we don't give up on fishing. We're on the final furlong now. We must keep fighting all the way to the wire. So what I want to start with, guys, if I can we set out in clear terms how big the British fishing industry used to be before we joined the EEC, how big it is now, and how big it could be if we took back full control of British waters?
Well, the fishing industry in England and Scotland before Europe was a big employer. It fed a lot of people and it employed a lot of people. But as soon as we joined Europe, I was on the deck of a trawler and it changed. It was everything for the European sector. Britain lost everything and has slowly been a decline. Our demise has been their growth. We've got to a point now in Lowestoft, we haven't got any ships left here now. We've got 13 stalwart fishermen with their boats in what we now call as hobby boat corner. We've been demised as a nation and pushed down till there's nothing left. If we get our way with Brexit and we got the 54% of fish back that flagships now have, and we get zonal attached fish, our fish take from net to plate could be £6.5 billion. No government could ever turn that amount of money away, and they should be behind people throughout this country who's worked hard to rebuild an industry. I just want to see an industry that's fit for young people to start work, and I want to see a fair industry. I don't want none of these double standards that's been played to us all over these years. We've been promised everything, but we have actually just seen demise, demise, demise. If you look at foreign fishing fleets, the answer is there. They're pretty, they're gaily painted, they're new, they're innovative. look in England, you've got old men, 60 years old, still going to sea in old boots they had when they were 30, and we've lost it all. Now, I'm afraid my last breath will be taken fighting for a fairer deal for British fishermen.
Yeah. And you know, sorry, June, I was just going to say, critics often point out, and they're still regurgitating the same argument, you know, the fishing industry in the UK is worth less than 1%. You know, if it's so insignificant, why are the EU fighting tooth and nail to keep it?
Because if you lived in a coastal zone and lived in a coastal area, fishing, well, it's 100% of my GDP.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's 100% of a lot of other people I know. When you live at the coast, you can only trade 180 degrees. You've got to look to the sea as your food. Now, as coastal people, we can't turn that away because that's all we got. A lot of places throughout the coast you'll go, half the people are involved in fishing in some shape or form. We've got a little town near us, Aldeburgh. That's a lovely seaside town. That's beautiful, that's tranquil. But the fishing is what draw the people there. I mean,
yeah.
Wherever you go.
I want to ask you, so straight away, you said £6 billion. At present, £1.4 billion. So straight away, Paul, you're talking about a threefold increase in the fishing industry overnight. So that is significant. Can you talk to me about some of the things that I think are most eye-opening about the unfairness of the arrangement we've got with the EU, or some of the quotas that the French vessels get, some of the quotas that the Spanish vessels get are simply staggeringly unfair, aren't they? Can you tell us about them, please, Paul?
Well, the quota is shared out on relative stability at the moment. So that's an idea that if you always caught it and always had it, you'll always get it. But what's happened, our market share has dwindled away and dwindled away, right to the point that in the Channel, which the worst case example is, France get 94% of the cod quota, England get 6%.
The injustice of it. It's like you're being discriminated against again and again by UK successive governments and abused by the EU and all of its policies to protect other EU member states in our waters. Do you feel discriminated against? Do you think it's a pattern?
Well, quite honestly, discrimination in fishing, there's not long enough to tell you all about what's going on with that, because the successive governments in Great Britain has gone along with the discrimination of the 80s and the 90s. None of them have had a big enough backbone to stand up and do this. The biggest example that we got that make them figures come true is when we go and negotiate the TAC in December in Europe, which we will still have to do because there will still have to be a decision on how much fish is coming out of the sea by each member state and each country each year.
Total allowable catch, that is. TAC.
I needed that, June, thanks.
It will still have to be negotiated, but what you've got to also realise is that when we go get our TAC and bring it back to England, 54% of that will go straight back into foreign hands because our government let foreign operators buy that quota.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so if we look back at some of the previous deals, we've previously offered the EU a 50% fixed quota deal. They rejected that. What about this deal that's been trumpeted about this week, Paul, and yourself, June? This idea that after 4 years of voting for Brexit, they're still saying we might taper down quotas for another 3 years. Now, would you accept that deal as any form of acceptable Brexit?
No,
never.
Not at all, not in any shape or
We
form.
will never surrender our resource. What give them that? Did Iceland, I ask you, did Iceland turn when Iceland realised that we were going over there and taking their wares, taking their fish and earning loads of money, and when they suddenly thought, well, hang on a minute, we want that back. Do you honestly think that small little country turned around and said, well, okay, then you can have 44%, 54%, you can have this, you can have, let me put my arm around you. No, they did not. They said, out you go and stay out.
Those were the cod balls, weren't they, June?
Well, look how successful Iceland is now. Now, what is this really about, I ask you?
That's exactly what I was going to ask you, June. What do you think this is really about?
Well, I think the fact of it is our government are sat there and they're not prepared.
No.
They've got nothing in place, because I've been asking the government, and I've been asking a lot of departments in government, where's the strategy that we're going to use to rebuild a wholly British fishing industry for a sovereign country? And no one can give me an answer yet. And I don't think that they've got anything planned, and they really don't know what to do about this.
This is the problem with the 3-year transition, is why have the Tories not been preparing over the last 4 years with increasing our fleet? Why suddenly now they've decided they need a 3-year transition? Why haven't they been doing it since 2016? Are they just hopeless? Or
I don't know about you, but any time I've been to the bank manager with my best suit on and my best attitude of the day and asked to borrow some money, he's always said to me, give us a business plan. So would I go to him and say to him, here's my business plan, but the government might take 3 years to make their mind up what we're going to do about this, but give me the £1 million anyhow, I'll build that boat in hope. You know, they're selling dreams to people, they are, that they are not going to see fulfilled. And if they don't soon wake up, investment will go somewhere else. There's only so much investment. And by the way, when foreigners buy British quota, they somehow think that's foreign investment. That investment they make once, that take an asset away from this country that could be used year in, years out to rebuild the British industry, and the profit from that would go into the British Treasury. Flagships do not bring any wealth back to this country. It's lost.
Paul, can you explain just very briefly what flagships are to our viewers?
A flagship is a British-owned ship that's bought by a foreign entity. They fish against British quota. But what happened was, in Margaret Thatcher's days, she made the 1988 Merchant Shipping Act that stood in the way of doing this. 75% of the money had to be domiciled UK money to buy a British fishing boat. So the money didn't go out of the country. Because what's happened is that got overturned by the ECJ. The Europeans again overruled, and our government hasn't got enough backbone to stand up. They still think they're being ruled by the ECJ. Well, we're left Europe, in all essence. We've got till January the 2nd to stomach this, but they need to be doing something now, and they need to be telling these people that we're going to take back control of the resource within our waters. We're not going to play about, because if you're going to build an industry, you want to build it to 100%. You can't build it halfway and turn around and say, we can't do no more because Johnny Foreigner owns it. Well,
okay, Paul. Okay, Paul. So we've heard some strong words from David Frost today. We've heard a lot of talk before. I want to ask you one final question. Do you have the hope that fishing will be salvaged and we will stand firm? Or do you think that the UK's fishermen will once again be thrown under the bus to save the Tory government?
Well, no, I got firm. There's no saying in there, don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes. Now, if I'm negotiating, that's exactly what I'd be doing. They're fighting hard and they're fighting the long ball for fishing. But at the end of the day, if you interpret David Frost's words, as I do, there's such a big divide, you'll never close that gap. So what we're going to do is stick with what Michael Gove said and take back full control and rebuild an industry that's a sovereign industry. No foreign boats will come through our waters and only take what's reciprocal to theirs. Absolutely. Now, I can live with that, but if they think they're going to trade us off and throw us under the bus, you know, we're not Alsatians with no teeth like the government are. We can bite.
Right.
Tom, man. Okay, so June, yeah, let's go straight into you, June. I can see you are an Alsatian with teeth. I sometimes find them biting on my arm over in Brussels and Strasbourg. And you certainly took chunks out of the blooming committees on PESH, and you took chunks out of the Liberal Democrats. You have a set of teeth, and you're not afraid to use them, June. I want to ask you this. You've got the ear and the voice of the coastal communities. You work in fishing. You're not an academic. You're in there. What is the mood in the British coastal communities right now?
Well, they don't. The mood at the moment is, why are they doing this to us? Why fishing? And let's just remember, this isn't just about fishing. This is about coastal communities, towns and villages that have been deprived and had the heart and soul ripped out of them. Now, opportunity knocks. We will take back control and rebuild our fishing industries all around the coast, creating thousands of jobs that are needed. Now, what government would throw that under the bus? But who in their right mind would do that? And I'll tell you, we've just witnessed how important coastal communities are. When all this lot from London couldn't go on their Saint-Tropez holidays, where did they all flock?
Absolutely,
to coastal communities to dip their soul in that very ocean that we should be protecting from super trawlers, pulse fishing. That's where they flocked. How dare they say that the GDP is low? How do we, living in these coastal areas, how do you think we pay our council tax so we can keep these coastal communities pretty and maintained so they can come here and enjoy the holidays and ice cream and kiss me quick? How do you think we're going to do that? So what, are we the sorry people and everybody else are the kings and queens? Is that how their government's going to play this?
And June, what do you think will
now,
happen? What do you think will happen if the 3-year transition does get agreed? What effect is that going to have on the coastal communities if they have to wait another 3 years with the super trawlers and the massive quotas being used? Will it survive? Will there be anything left to save?
Well, there's only so far that you can downtrod things to the point where they won't recover. I mean, I've got a son, 26 years old, and I mean, we're now trying to get a business together for him. And once he gets established, I can retire. What have I got to go home and say to him? Sorry, son, your own government that you've fought to get in power and now thrown you out in the rain.
Yeah.
How do you think people are going to feel? I mean, at the end of the day, you know.
So it's a good point, Paul.
It's not good enough. It's not good enough to treat people like that.
No.
At the end of the day, what have I got to turn around and say, oh, I was sold out because the financial services are so important? Well, you know, everyone's important and everyone deserved to be looked after, because even Theresa May said no community would be left alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, no, but both of you guys, don't you find it ironic? One of the things that's really stuck in my craw from Michel Barnier, he was expecting the British coastal communities to feel sorry for the French coastal communities. The EU coastal communities, well, they'll be devastated if they're not allowed to plunder British waters anymore. Why haven't they cared about the effect on British coastal communities? And why hasn't our government said, do you know what? We don't care about the French coastal communities. We care about the British coastal communities.
Do you know, I'll tell you a little story now that people should sit back and listen to this. I stood in Lowestoft and watched a grown man cry because his boat was cut up for decommissioning. His sons worked on the boat with him and one of his cousins worked with him. And he had to sell that boat. The government decommissioned that boat. Where they took his license, they took his boat and they cut it up for scrap metal. That whole family have never worked since. They had to do that under this multi-annual guidance plan. And that was to let the Dutch expand their fleet, let the French expand their fleet, but Lowestoft decimated their fleet. And there's nothing left here anymore. I can't feel sorry for people, because what I feel sorry for the poor excuse of politicians who thought that was good for Great Britain.
Correct.
That wasn't good for Great Britain.
No, it wasn't.
That was the end of Great Britain, until our politicians actually get and grow a set and realise that jobs are paramount to everything. With this horrible pandemic we're now gone through, there's nothing more apparent than you've got to create jobs and produce food. We go to sea, we catch fish. That's food we catch. We get money for it, but the nation gets food from it.
It's been heartbreaking seeing the thriving coastal towns reduced to ghost towns, basically dependent on welfare now over the last few decades. And we now have this historic chance to to rejuvenate these areas. And if the Boris government doesn't grab it, I think it will haunt them for the rest of their lives.
Haunt them? Yeah, there's 186 coastal MPs. Where are they? Why aren't they banging on Boris's door or David Frost's door? Because I tell you now, if I'd have been elected in Lowestoft and this was happening, I would be causing riots in that parliament now. I'd have rounded up the rest of those coastal MPs and I'd have said, what the hell are we going to do? But where are they? I haven't heard from, I spoke to my MP last night and he didn't know a thing. He didn't know anything about it. Now, what is this all about?
Well, June, I was going to ask you actually, now there are many from number 10 that will be watching this. What message do you have to them at this critical time to persuade them to defend your communities and the coastal areas that have been decimated for so long? What is your message for them?
If you love your country and the people, then you stop this now. You cannot let this happen, because Belinda, if they do, there will be trouble. There are a lot of people out there, not all these people live in coastal areas either. They want that ocean back. That has played, these pulse trawlers, super trawlers, that they've played havoc with Mother Nature. We want things back in our country and safe.
Quite right, June. No, I agree.
Oh,
it's quite emotional, actually, to be honest. I find this is an emotional moment for so many people, because it's an industry that's been sneered at too long by the British as well. We saw it over the whole Brexit vote, this constant deriding and ignoring and belittling of the coastal communities from our own British politicians. And it's got to stop. People are making millions out of our fish, and it's not the Brits.
Do you know what really chokes me about this? I'm from Nottingham, right? I'm about as big a landlubber as you'll get. I'm from the middle of Britain, but my dad was a miner, and we watched the mines die. We watched the mines go. We watched them forever lost. And I've always thought Brexit is our last chance. Yes. It's our last fight to save fishing. And why the hell haven't our politicians fought like you, June? Why the hell have they not fought like you, Paul? And this is life or death. This isn't a game. This isn't posturing. This isn't politics. It's about survival, and it matters. And it sticks in my craw when all these idiots say, oh, it's only 0.1% of the community of the GDP. Go and say that to a fisherman. Go and say that to a coal miner. Go and say that to a steel worker.
I've had that told to me by a government official, that how small a GDP, well, that won't matter against, and at the end of the day, I was so angry I had to leave.
Yeah.
I've been criminalised through fishing. When I was a young man raising my children, and they reduced quotas from 8 tonnes a month to 4 tonnes a month, I had to go and break the law. 8 tonnes is what I needed to pay my mortgage and my boat loan. I had to still go catch that 8 tonnes, and the insensitive and the stupidity of it. How could they expect me to survive when they just cut that in half? But the ironic part of it was, during that time, they were taking fish from me and stopping me getting a living. Flagships were buying that right up from under our nose. Why didn't our government at the time turn around and say, well, hang on, you can't buy that, because you'll make them people unable to pay their way in this world. Now, that's humbling. But when you have to go and break the law to stay afloat from your government has put you in that position. That's why I quite honestly don't understand why more politicians haven't looked at the demise of their ports and their villages where fishing is and thought, well, hang on, Brexit is one last chance now where we can see that thrive again.
Well, I think Boris has a chance to either be a Heath or a hero. And he's got a very small amount of time to make up his mind, hasn't he?
Yeah, that is true. Look, do you know what? I just don't understand why people didn't get this from the very beginning. We talk about fishing all the time as being such a passionate, core, important, strategic industry in Britain. It's been swept aside. And think of what it could be. Think about the potential that could be unlocked. If we just listened and took back control. We need to think ahead, not where we are now, not look back to the past, This is an opportunity. Barnier's had us by the balls all these years. Now it's our turn to grow a pair, and I'm absolutely with you. Look, we've got to move on. We've got to move on. We'll come back to you in a bit, but we've got people itching to get on the show. Next guest, James Glancy, another huge talent, a great friend of ours. I mean, you were there battling away as an MEP, not just an MEP. Here's a guy that I would like on my side in a dark alleyway, a former Royal Marines officer and Veterans for Wildlife. You're in control of that, and you are presenter of Planet SOS on TV. And a surprising feather to your cap, James, is that you are a keen environmentalist. And I think it's really important to talk about the environmental issues of fishing, because I learned so much in my time in Brussels from yourself and from June about some of the, frankly, unacceptable and barbaric practices that the European Union were quite happy to put into operation, such as pulse fishing and the super trawlers. Can you tell us a bit more about some of these, I think, completely unacceptable environmental issues?
Well, guys, it's great to see you, and thank you for having me on. And it's great to see June as well. And June has campaigned for a long time on one of the issues you mentioned there, which is pulse fishing. Just could you imagine if you just had 2 acres of jungle or forest full of beautiful animals, and you wired that up with electricity, turned that electricity on, and killed everything in there, and then went and swept it off the forest floor? That's essentially what pulse fishing is. They drag these beam nets across the ocean floor, across the sea floor, and electrocute everything to suck it up into the net. I mean, you couldn't write this stuff. That's just one example. There's 90 of those boats that come out of Holland. But I think what's the strangest thing about the common fisheries policy is that it is the subsidized destruction of the oceans. And by the way, that's those subsidies, very few of them are actually filtered through the British fleet, but it's the subsidized destruction of our seas. And we know the Mediterranean has been hit hard, but even by the EU's own admission, 3/4 of the ocean on the continent of Europe are overexploited. So they've knowingly overexploited the ocean and the seas. They've knowingly done that, and they're still putting more money to subsidize these huge trawlers, these pulse fishing vessels. Now, the fleet is over 100,000 strong. They've got this domestic fleet of over 100,000 strong. They've also got an international fleet that goes to other people's waters. So it goes into the Pacific, hoovers up all their tuna. That goes into African nations' coastal waters and hoovers up all their fish. It's like this empire. It's very reminiscent of the old British Empire or the battles of empires, where they literally see this thing as a resource. They're paying their own fleets to go and hoover it up around the world with no regard for the ecological devastation that they're leaving.
And the thing that always struck me as curious about that is, first of all, hardly anybody seemed to know about that on the fishing committee. I remember when June Mummery told them about this, and they were seemingly oblivious. And secondly, why is it that the Green Party, the Liberal Democrat Party, the Labour Party, the parties who profess to be the protectors of the environment, turn a complete blind eye to the environmental devastation committed by the European Union in fisheries?
It's a question that still baffles me, because very few people seem willing to criticise the EU's effect on biodiversity on land through the common agriculture policy. Those voices are there, and let's be honest, there are some good Greens and there are some people from cross-party, but generally they're very silent on these issues. The biggest issue they're silent on is the effect that common fisheries policies has had on the ocean. And I suspect it's because they see the EU as doing no harm, and these left-wing parties see the EU as a way of bringing in sort of socialism through the back door, and they're willing to trade off the environment to have this sort of socialist utopia. I mean, I don't really understand their motivations, but what also strikes me is that people are very quick to sign petitions against trophy hunting in Africa. Very emotive subject, but they're very quick to tell people what to do in other countries, and yet in our own backyard, they're happy to stand by while you have the mass ecological destruction of the ocean bed, of coral reefs, of huge stocks of fish. And there seems to be absolutely nobody, or very few voices, calling for sustainable fisheries, or calling for the reduction of the EU fishing fleet. I find it absolutely, it's one of the biggest hypocrisies I've ever seen. And you've all been there in the EU, where they talk about this Green New Deal and how they're going to make everything brilliant. But when it comes down to it, they're not prepared to take genuine action.
It's absolutely baffling. I mean, won't even touch on the carbon footprint that is created by 700 odd MEPs all traveling to Brussels and then Strasbourg. And, you know, I could never quite understand why the Green Party, knelt down on the altar of EU word and didn't ever question it. Because for me as well, it's not just ecological. You made a very good point about the EU fleets going outside of EU waters. And for example, they raid the fish from Africa as well, the coastline. And, that increases poverty along the coast, as it has done with the UK, and may even encourage more economic migrants to come into Europe. And I think these are important points that people don't realize. The EU is not this Mother Teresa that goes around sprinkling fairy dust on everyone. There are some actual quite dark forces around, especially when it comes to the environment. And that's why we love having you on, James, because you're an expert in this. It's really important our viewers understand the environmental damage the EU does.
Well, I think, there is a balance on this, because, Britain itself has never been a leading light in environmental legislation, and the way the EU has led the way on things like clean air, on water quality, but it hasn't done that on biodiversity, on land and at sea. So, if you were to look at its report card, on some aspects, the EU has genuinely led the way. But I'm afraid on the oceans, it's the opposite. And if the EU doesn't stop, we're actually pushing some species to the brink of extinction. And I'll give you an example. ICAT, which is a body which recommends what types of species need to be protected, because it monitors different marine species. It recommended last year that there should be no take of mako sharks in the Northern Atlantic. Now, Spain, the EU, is the biggest exploiter of the mako shark. They're now endangered. In fact, their populations could spiral to the point where there will be no mako sharks in Northern Atlantic. The EU had these scientific recommendations and voted not to take that advice on board, so they can carry on fishing for them in an unregulated way. I.e., what the EU is saying is, we know they're going to go extinct, but we're not prepared to put a few Spanish fishermen out of business or to stop them catching them, because our short-term mindset is economic. It's not really about the environment.
No, it's what worries me about the 3-year transition as well, because how on earth are you going to patrol and police the EU fleets of how much they take? If they will bend and break any law to make sure they get their fishing quota, what's the point in saying to them they've only got 3 years? I can imagine lots of scuffles out in the sea, and then perhaps not behaving as well.
In fairness, Zach Goldsmith has said that these so-called marine protected areas, which aren't actually protected at all, which is where these super trawlers are currently exploiting, they will be banned. But I imagine, let's wait and see. We've created these protected areas, but they're not protected from anything. And you've got to remember, these commercial interests, the people that own those big boats, they've managed to get, and it's interesting what they were saying earlier, they've managed to get the finance to create these big fleets. These are huge corporate interests which have amazing lobbying systems in the EU. They are not willing to give this up. They've taken the subsidies, they've built themselves big boats, and the last thing they want to do is destroy that revenue stream. And so they're going to fight very hard to ensure that they can keep exploiting our waters.
Okay, James, I'm going to ask you one final question, and then I'd like to go back to Paul and June and ask them the same question, and that is this: how confident are you, marks out of 10, that the British government will take back full control of British waters, and we will have once again a fully independent fishing industry that we deserve?
Well, I mean, it's not going to happen in 2021. There's no way. Could there be a transition towards it in over 3 or 4 years? Potentially, but I just can't see it. And I'll tell you why I can't see it. Is because London wants access to the EU market. And essentially, you know, we've got a gun to each other's head. The French, the French don't want to throw, and the Spanish don't want to throw their fishermen, their coastal villages and towns under a bus, and we don't want to throw London under a bus. So, you know, it's a game of chicken. Maybe there'll be a no deal.
Okay, so I'm going to push you for a score. I know you're a politician. You're very good at evading questions. Marks out of 10, with 10 being a clean break.
Well, I don't think there'll be a clean break, because I don't think Boris has, you know, he's been shown to not have the guts to make the right decision at the right time. And there will be a deal, and it won't be favourable to fishing.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, there's a 2 out of 10.
Yeah.
Wow, 2 out of 10. Bit of a somber prediction there, James. You've been amazing. Let's cut back to Paul and June. Paul and June, same question. With 10 being full independence of British waters as a truly sovereign, independent coastal state, what are the scores on the doors?
Well, I'm going out for 7 out of 10.
Wow, that's it. You're hopeful, Paul.
You've got to have some belief in something in your life.
Yeah.
Now, I've spoken to a lot of people, and I've worked very hard with June on this, and they've got to do a lot of heart searching if they look so deep in my eyes and lied to me. And I'm going to go for 7 out of 10.
June, final words on this one, June, to you. The scores on the doors, June Mummery.
Right. So I think after they've watched this, after they've watched Unlocked, and if they've got any sense, we will be leaving without a deal. Because this, to sit and watch something like this, you know, talking to Paul and James and I and both of you, they've got to sleep at night. And I can tell you now, and I've tweeted this to most of them, this will haunt them for the rest of their lives. You know, wherever they go, they'll be in some coastal community, or they might want to vote in 4 years' time.
Exactly.
And they go out and people say, hang on a moment, I remember you. They're finished.
Yeah.
This is the thing. They will be finished if they do not either sort us out. So I'm going to go with no deal after watching this.
Well, I'm hoping there are people from number 10 that are listening very eagerly to all your words. June, Paul, James, thank you. I hope we can save our oceans, take care of our environment, and save our fishing.
Yeah, it's just really, really inspiring to have these sort of conversations. And I just really hope that they listen to these guys, they listen to the 17.4 million. You know, fishing for me was always a red line. We're almost there. I'm loving the optimism. Yeah, I'm with you, June. If they're listening in, let's go clean. Paul, I'm liking you. James, slightly pessimistic, but hey, we got some balance on the table. That's the way it should be. Thanks, guys. A brilliant fishing special. Now then, we've got a complete change of pace. Last week on Brexit Unlocked, we did a Eurosceptic special. And we had the leader of the Frexit movement from France, the leader of Italexit from Italy, and Rob Roos, a Dutch MEP, Eurosceptics, one and all. Who'd care about that, you think, in the United Kingdom, except guess what? It had 400,000 views via the Daily Express Facebook page. It was a #1 piece of content they did all week, because guess what? Brits really, really care about the Eurosceptic movement, and they care about the spirit of Brexit spreading across the continent. And tonight, we've got another splendid Eurosceptic guest, haven't we, Belinda?
Oh, Laura Huhtasaari, thank you so much for coming on. Laura has been a wonderful friend to the UK, especially in the UK Parliament, the EU Parliament. If you've got a chance, viewers at home, Google Laura's Brexit Party speech. It is so emotional, and it really conveyed the passion and friendship of our Eurosceptic friends in the Parliament that you'd never see on the BBC or Sky. And, you know, we really appreciated it. So it's great to have you on our show, Laura. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And I miss you guys.
Oh, we miss you too. We have the first question really we would love to ask you, Laura, is your Eurosceptic movement in Finland. Can you explain a little bit about it, and also why there are Finnish people desperately unhappy with their membership with the EU?
The thing is that actually the criticism towards monetary union euro has increased. But when it comes to the membership of the EU, the Finnish people, they don't realize that this is actually a project that it will be a federal state. They think that this is a free trade union between independent countries, and that's actually not the way it is. But they don't get enough information, and that's why, like, your channel is very, very important, and I'm trying to do my part of this one. And actually, but there is the EU Critic Party, and that's my party, of course. And our youth organization made this citizens initiative to have a referendum over recovery fund. And in only 4 days, the 50,000 signatures were we got them, and now it's going to be given to the parliament. But because we have a left-wing government and they have majority, they will bury it and we won't get the referendum.
No. Oh, that's so disappointing after all your efforts, and especially what you clearly have to fight against, which is constant pro-EU narrative, pro-EU indoctrination, and you finally get the petition going and it's being buried. That's very sad to hear.
That's a good point. And I wanted to ask you, and I asked our Eurosceptic friends last week, anybody from Britain will know the media treatment of Brexiteers has been very, very one-sided. It's been very, very harsh. We've been called Little Englanders, xenophobes, small-minded. We want to retreat to the comfort blanket of the empire. All nonsense. How does the media treat people in Finland that would like to leave the European Union?
Well, first of all, the Finnish people think positively about the EU, not all of them, but some, because they actually believe media and our left-wing politicians that they are telling the truth about EU. And for example, this recovery fund, which is 750 billion euros, our left-wing politicians are telling my people that this is only a one-time thing and it will never happen again. Though we know that's a lie, and this is only the beginning and worst is yet to come. But actually, there's nothing really new here, because when I was a kid, you couldn't criticize or say anything bad about the Soviet Union. Now you can't say anything bad about the EU. So when we before bowed our heads to the Moscow, now it's Brussels. And if you still do, like I and some other EU critics, that we criticize EU, the media will treat you as an enemy.
It's interesting.
Well,
so,
you know, that's the way it goes.
Aside from this kind of totalitarian mindset of Brussels, you know, we've heard, actually, we heard from previous guests that, yeah, the USSR was compared to the EU and other countries too. What else is it in Finland that's driving Euroscepticism? Is it purely the economy? Is it things like immigration? What issues are floating to the surface?
Well, it's everything. Like why I'm in EU critics, because you know, this is superpower project, and when you are a little country like Finland, a small country, you should be able to rely on treaties and laws should be your safety net. But because EU does not follow its own rules, so you never know what's going to happen next, and nothing is predictable. And then, for example, this recovery fund. First, EU decides who gets the money, and then after that, the criteria to have the money. And in the Green Deal, it's the same thing. I mean, I can't believe that nuclear power is not getting green funding. It's the same thing. They just first decide who gets the money and then the criteria.
No, we feel your pain. I would love to know, from your point of view as a Eurosceptic in the EU Parliament, what is your take on Ursula von der Leyen's suing the UK strategy that she came out with. Was it yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday there was big news over the UK that the EU was suing the UK over Boris's attempt to clarify elements of the Withdrawal Act. Because the EU had threatened to put obstacles in the way between the trade of Northern Ireland and Great Britain. From your point of view, is it the case that the whole of the EU is behind von der Leyen in suing the UK, or is there some sympathy for the UK from your side?
Well, of course, you have my sympathy, and that's obviously. But I'm not actually surprised at all, because the withdrawal agreements gives a tool EU to do that, and this is a negotiation tactic, and EU won't give you a good deal. But I'm afraid that Great Britain will accept a bad deal. I mean, EU will demand UK law must be bound to EU law and free access to your fishing waters and jurisdiction of the EU Court of Justice. And I think that it's kind of likely now that you will get a bad deal, but let's hope that this night will change their minds.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I asked all the other guys, marks out of 10 for getting a great deal for Britain. It sounds like the scores on the doors, Laura, are pretty poor from you. What do you think? With 10 being a brilliant clean break Brexit, what do you think we're going to get?
I'm not optimistic. I'm sorry. I want to be, but I'm not. I'm always trying to be realistic, but I don't lose my hope, so I'm keeping my thumbs up.
Well, Laura, what would be fantastic is to have a message of support or encouragement from Finland, from our European friends that have supported us in our democratic move to release the UK from EU power. Do you have a message of support for the British people?
Well, first of all, I wanted to be a politician because of Nigel Farage and the you Brexiteers. I mean, you are my inspiration. And I want to say that because I don't think that my grandparents did not defend my country's independence just to give it away to under Brussels. And I'm very proud of you.
Oh.
And it takes nothing to stand in the crowd, but it takes everything to stand alone. And you guys have national pride, and that is one of the most precious things you can pass on to the next generations.
Laura, thank you. Well, one of the most precious things is our friendship, and may all Europeans stand together and promote democracy. We stand with you in solidarity too. Laura, thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Yeah, it's been superb, and thank you to all of our guests today. We hope that we've kind of dangled a tempting proposition overboard, and that is we can save fishing. Some people optimistic, others not so. But look, we're always optimistic on Unlocked. We're having the conversations the mainstream media do not want to have. They're afraid to have. They actively suppress. But here we can talk about anything. We can talk about a free Britain, and we can fight back, and we can speak against the European Union without them cancelling us, because they can't cancel us here. So look, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
If you like Unlocked, please share. Remember to like, subscribe to all of our social media channels, and tell your friends about it. Spread the message. We are the insurgent force fighting back against the mainstream media. We've been Unlocked. I've been your host, Martin Daubney.
Lovely to have you all. Thank you for watching. I've been Belinda DeLucy. Keep engaged, keep the pressure on, and thank you so much for watching.
And we've got a superb episode of Brexit Unlocked featuring Anne Widdecombe and June Slater coming up the day after this, and we'll be back every week until we get a proper Brexit done. Thanks for tuning in to Unlocked.